few more beatings of the wind and rain, ere the winter will be over. Glory, hallelujah. Some friends have gone before me. I must try to go and meet them. Glory, hallelujah. A few more risings and settings of the sun, ere the winter will be over. Glory, hallelujah. There's a better day a-comin'. There's a better day a-comin'. Oh, glory, hallelujah.
Hello everybody, welcome to the week 8 final project. As you can see, I will be doing my final project in video form. This course has been great and I have learned many things. One thing I have learned even better is that historians must be objective and honest in their evaluation of history. I have also come to see that God raises up his servants to deal with issues in their society that are not pleasing to him. One great example would be Martin Luther King Jr. Another great example would be the circuit preachers. The image of a man riding through the forest, braving the wind, the rains, the summer heat, the famine, and all other hardships, is iconic now for these men, as they traveled from place to place, preaching the gospel to congregation after congregation in village after village. And they faced many hardships, some of which are familiar to us. For instance, how to provide for a family. They had to face the fear that they could not provide for their family or how they would put food on the table. And many of them would answer this dilemma in different ways. It is important to remember where these men came from. Some of them were products of the ministry of the early circuit preachers. They came to a camp meeting or heard the preaching of one of the ministers in a town, felt the conviction of the Lord and repented and became a minister of his to the lost. However, especially in the beginning, many of them came from back east, from a more sedentary life, from a life that had more commodities, yet they felt called by God to travel into the wilderness and preach the gospel to this population, this rough and dispersed population. The logistics of this were incredible. The roads, such as there were poorly kept. The people lived in small hamlets and villages throughout the region. There weren't many large towns, which meant it was very hard for a minister to find a localized place to preach from, which gave rise to the tradition of circuit preachers traveling one place to the other. The preferred method for them was to ride horses from one place to another. In fact, the saddlebags of the circuit preachers became symbols that would be associated with them for years. It was the Methodists who first contributed circuit preachers and contributed a vast majority of circuit preachers to their ranks. The Methodists had a very strong drive for evangelism at this time in history. One can think of the Sky Pilot, a nickname given to a Methodist minister, who ministered to the loggers up north, traveling from camp to camp, much as the circuit preachers did. Going into town, trying to help the loggers avoid the sins of drink and going to the saloon and gambling away their money. In fact, he was known for escorting young men away past the saloon who were young to the train so they could take their wages back home. These circuit preachers had much the same heart. Like I said before, they traveled from town to town, helping people where they could.
Peter Cartwright was one such Methodist minister. He was a circuit preacher that worked a circuit in Iowa and Indiana. In the course of his long career, he preached around 15,000 sermons. He also ran for Congress against Abraham Lincoln. However, when he returned back east from his missions trips, or his ministry trips rather, he encouraged others to go and become circuit preachers as well, and some would answer that call. And the circuit preachers would become a more common occurrence. Cartwright left his memoirs, the autobiography of Peter Cartwright, in which he details the hardships that they had to endure, especially at the beginning. In the preface of his autobiography, he states, "Many nights in early time the itinerant had to camp out without fire or food for man or beast. Our pocket Bible, hymn book, and discipline constituted our library. He also speaks of camp meetings and traveling from town to town, ministering the gospel, and the people that got saved there. In fact, in his autobiography, he details the lives of a number of other preachers, his friends and people that he trained. One minister, he details by the name of Brother Lee, was instrumental in the conversion of a Dutchman and his wife, who were struggling. And the heart of Cartwright for his ministry can be seen when he stated this: "Thus, Brother Lee was the honored instrument in the hand of God, a planting of Methodism amid clouds of ignorance and opposition among the early settlers of the far West." His deepest desire was to see people come to the Lord, and he preached that regularly. While the Methodists contributed a majority of the ministers to the circuit preachers, there were other denominations that did send out circuit preachers. Groups like the Baptists, who, similar to the Methodists, were active in evangelism. Baptists, however, usually supported the farmer-preacher method, where a man would work his farm by day and during the week, and in the weekend he would preach from the pulpit. Yet they did send out a few circuit riders, one of which was John Sparkman. John Sparkman worked a circuit in Tennessee. His family comes from the area around Eaton, Tennessee. And his family, descendants rather, still record that he would have to rely on the generosity of the people who would listen to him in order to survive. People would give him food, a chicken, whatnot, and he would take it home to provide for his family. However, the family remembers one time in which he didn't get any food when he came home from his circuit. All he came home with was a single pair of socks. And many circuit preachers, including Cartwright, relied upon the generosity of the people they preached to. In fact, funding and a livelihood were one of the major obstacles that circuit preachers had to overcome. However, they would overcome that. There were a number of circuit preachers in Texas who came up with a rather unique answer to this dilemma. According to Barbara Barton's article, "Circuit Riding Preachers Earn Their Money by Ranching," the circuit preachers in Texas began to ranch in order to earn a living. Leander Randon Milliken was one of them. The ranching allowed him to settle down and minister in a regular church. All of these issues were dealt with by all the different denominations. Ministering across such a vast territory required horseback. Ministering to so many people required the funds. Some of them were supported by churches, it is true. But most of them had to find out a means of survival for themselves. In fact, one minister records how one lady gave him a pair of fruit or nuts that was rotting or partially rotting, saying, well, the preacher can make do with it. Or how he had to tell the one congregation that he would not preach to them until they were willing to pay the amount of food that they had promised him. All of these things were the difficulties that came with self-funding your missions.
The effect and ministry of the circuit preachers is hard to understate. They traveled the vast distances in the forests of the western frontier, hoping to reach a highly dispersed and in many ways biblically ignorant population. They reached people by traveling to their homes and villages, from village to village, and they even set up and or participated in camp meetings where thousands would come to hear the gospel. In fact, the camp meetings would come to inspire many of the revivals that we see today. Peter Cartwright identifies many of the problems that they would face, from weather to having a lack of resources. And in fact, the story of the Baptist circuit preacher, John Sparkman, how he came home with a pair of socks given him by his ministers, rather than food, underscores the reliance that the ministers had upon the people to whom they ministered to. And those people sometimes could not afford to give much, sometimes simply were not generous. This led many Baptist circuit preachers in Texas, or rather a few, to take up ranching in order to provide for themselves, that they may be able to earn a living and to continue preaching. A few more beatings of the wind and rain, ere the winter will be over. Glory, hallelujah. Some friends has gone before me, I must try and go and meet them. Glory, hallelujah. A few more risings and settings of the sun, ere the winter will be over. Glory, hallelujah. There's a better day a-comin', there's a better day a-comin', oh glory,